All right, welcome to the Backyard Professor live show. I'm supposed to be putting on some kind of a really cool whoop-de-doo, aren't I? Oh, well, tough luck. So tonight's going to be an interesting night. I have a really kind of different approach here. I want to respond to perhaps the most famous Jewish rabbi on YouTube, Rabbi Tovia Singer, and I've watched dozens and dozens of this man's video. His intelligence with the Tanakh is absolutely over the top. The man is breathtakingly phenomenal. And yet, because of his extreme bias, and I think this is going to be a fabulous object lesson for all of us, no matter what your range in life. I don't care if you're in the church or out of the church, whatever. The effect of this magnificent teacher's bias completely warps and distorts his scholarship in so many ways. Sometimes it is absolutely impeccable. Other times it's horrifyingly stupid. I'm not trying to insult the man, just his arguments. Tonight, I want to share one of his stupidest arguments I have ever seen. Before I do that, though, I have a special guest who's making a special appearance, and I mean all of you in the chat. Wanda Anthony, Tim Rathbone, Doug Vincent, how are y'all? Alan Zabriskie couldn't make it, but he said he would watch the video. Good. Be sure and hit the like button and subscribe if you would. Hold on, I've got to put this thing on. There you go. Hit the subscribe button. Hit the bell, notification bell. And if you don't, I'm going to have to ask. No, I'm just kidding. What the fetch? No. I don't have to. All right, let's get back to reality. Now, I have a wonderful guest that we want to talk about a completely different subject for first few minutes, and then we shall get back to another branch of reality. So if you will all get ready, put your hands together for my dear and good friend, longtime friend, who is a fellow, I'm going to say fellow scholar. I'm not near his caliber, and I'm probably stretching the truth to claim I'm in the scholarly area. However, this guy's the real deal. Here we go. You ready? Don Bradley!
Hey, Kerry.
How are you, Don?
Or BYP. How you doing?
Good. I'm doing good. I tried to build you up. I really did.
Thank you for that.
I don't have to, though. Your reputation precedes yourself.
Oh, thank you.
Hey,
as you can see, my wonderful wife, Jasmine, has arranged a nice, great place on the couch for me. So I'm living the cush life here.
Nice. Very nice. I'm jealous. I have to sit in this hard-backed office chair so that I can keep my posture. So people are probably wondering, how are you? And we have a little issue that has been coming up recently on the YouTube. I noticed it just a week ago, not quite a week ago, but this last week. And it's about something called the Cavalry.
Yeah.
And so I think you've got some insight into this. So what are we talking about when we hear, I mean, I've seen a couple of different videos on this thing they call the Cavalry. Are the cavalry coming? Are we going to be saved? What's going on? What is this?
Yeah. So very recently, Mormon on the podcast Mormonish, they covered the Facebook group called the Cavalry. So the person I know everyone actually who was on that episode. That was Rebecca Biblioteca, a bit of a tongue twister there.
Yeah.
Landon Brophy and the mysterious RFM.
Radio Free Mormon. You're calling him
Radio Free Mormon. I said mysterious.
Oh, mysterious. Okay.
Yeah.
That's much more.
So, yes, there's a mystique there, right? So, yeah, they did an episode about this thing called the Cavalry, this Facebook group. Where else did you hear about it, Carrie?
Radio Free Mormon had a post on it, a video,
Oh, okay.
just I think yesterday or the
Oh,
day
okay.
before that
Oh,
he
I
put.
didn't see that.
I have not had a chance to see it all yet either. I haven't seen the totality of either one of them, but
Okay.
it's making its rounds on the YouTube, and
Okay.
so what do you know about it?
So, one of the things that they showed on the video, and I don't know, maybe RFM mentioned this too, is this is a Facebook group that people can view. It's a private group, but people can view like the landing page for it publicly. And so it actually lists the admins and moderators there of the group. And so these are the people called the scholars within the group. And I show up as one of them. And so I'm someone who has experience within the group, right?
Oh,
And
okay.
so, yeah. And so Rebecca Biblioteca particularly talked about it. So it is a Facebook group that is for currently serving Latter-day Saint missionaries. And I was personally invited to it about a year ago. I was fairly active for 4 to 6 weeks. Occasionally since then, mostly not active since then. Occasionally since then, I've been tagged on comments and have offered a comment here and there. So the idea behind it, as I have understood it, right, is that Latter-day Saint missionaries don't have normal, like full internet access. So my understanding is they don't have access to YouTube. Maybe I don't know if it depends some on what mission they're in, but they don't have access, I think, to Google. They have access to Google Drive, and so documents can be shared with them. So if someone is a currently serving Latter-day Saint missionary, they may encounter people, members in wards that they serve in, or investigators that they encounter, who have seen a YouTube video that's critical of the church. So, like
Oh, you mean
Mormon
like
stories,
mine?
let's say,
Are they
or
talking about
what
me yet?
could be. So, um, so they might see something like that, or a critical website. This would probably usually be like evangelical, quote unquote, anti-Mormons, right? Putting out content. And so the missionaries are not sort of on equal footing here informationally, because they can't necessarily, if someone tells them about a YouTube video or a website, they can't necessarily go watch the video, visit the website, right? And so there's a group of Latter-day Saint scholars who are like older, right, have more information, who are on this group, where the missionaries can ask questions of the scholars, and then the scholars can provide information on the group, or they can share a Google Drive document so that the missionaries then have information. So then they're
You
not
realize,
necessarily
sorry
what?
to interrupt you, but you do realize that you just condemned yourself by saying that they can have access to some of the older scholars and they invited you.
Yes, I'm
So
definitely well past my
I'm
missionary
just
years.
saying, I'm not the one that called you the old
I'm self-condemning here, yes, for sure. Um, so that is at least part of the idea behind the group, as I've understood it. And the group has been around for a few or several years. I know it's got a lot of
Oh, really?
alumni, right? Like
Really?
past missionaries who've
Hmm.
been on it. I don't recall how long. And like I said, so it's been around long before I was invited. I was invited, if I recall right, I was invited by the person who started the group. And the names of the admins and moderators are available at like I said, on Facebook, but I'm not going to publicly mention their names, right?
That's cool. All good.
So I was invited. I was told, there are scholars to help answer missionaries' questions. It really has seemed to me like this is a good idea, right? The idea behind this is very good. So for the reason that I mentioned already, right, missionaries being at kind of an informational disadvantage, I think not only undermines their work, I think it can also be like psychologically kind of challenging. And this is actually one of the things that Rebecca Biblioteca talks some about. So she expressed, I'll get to her concerns that she expressed about the group. One thing, well, maybe I'll address one up front. So she mentioned that she was concerned that maybe this is kind of like not going to be approved by the church, and so it would get missionaries in trouble because it's not a church, it's not an official church thing, right? And so would missionaries get in trouble for being, involved in this group? And there was an idea on the podcast that maybe there was an attempt to hide the group from the church. I mean, there are 15,000 members, thousands of whom are currently serving LDS
So
missionaries.
It's a big group.
It's a big group, and so
why would they, why would they get in trouble for getting access to more information to help them? Because, like you're saying, if they don't have access, look, I'm not kidding. Everything is on Google now. Right. I mean, Google is given the Holy Ghost to run for the money for giving out information. No blasphemy intended, but wow, we have a world of information, instant access. If these kids can't get that, but people in the group can and then turn around and share it, I don't see why that would get them in trouble.
So I've never heard of anyone getting in trouble for being on the group.
Okay.
It's certainly not an official church thing, but on the other hand, I think there was some idea among the participants in the Mormonish podcast that maybe the group was sort of being hidden from the church or something. I've never seen any indication of that. No. So as I've had conversations, message conversations with other of the adults, the scholars on the group, I've never heard of any attempt to, the adults.
Hey, you're supposed to call them brethren, Don.
Well, they're our sisters as well. So, I've never heard any idea of trying to hide anything, and I don't think that if you have thousands of currently serving missionaries on a group like this, that I would think at least a lot of the mission presidents would have to be aware of it, if not most. That doesn't mean that it's like officially approved, because I've also never heard any indication that there's some sort of official imprimatur on it. Rather, I think it falls into a kind of middle category where members of the church do things on their own initiative, right? And as you know, Carrie, that's even encouraged in a section of the Doctrine and Covenants, right? And so I should mention too here that I'm speaking only for myself. I'm not speaking for the group. I'm, or anyone else. I'm just talking for me. So, Rebecca, I'll get to more of her concerns. She gave me permission to mention that she and I talked on the phone for a good while yesterday. We had a great conversation, and she and I expressed that we both feel very protective. Oh my gosh, picture just fell off the wall. So it's actually a map of Harmony, Pennsylvania, where I was looking at, like, where did Joseph Smith live? Where did the Hale family live? What were the sort of treasure digging sites? Where was the Susquehanna River? Where was Joseph and Oliver Cowdery's experience with John the Baptist, sort of placing it on that map, topographical map, but it just fell off the wall. So what was I telling you? Yeah, Rebecca and I both really agreed that we both feel really protective of young people, and that includes young Latter-day Saint missionaries, right? And
Well,
so
the church is throwing them out there on their own. What are you guys worried about?
Oh, about 10 years ago, there was a website. I don't get angry very often, but I did get angry on this occasion. I felt really protective of the missionaries, and not just
Sure.
missionaries, other sort of young Latter-day Saints. There was a website that purported to be a missionary prep website, helping young people who were planning on going on missions to like learn more about the gospel and so on. It was actually a critical website masquerading as a mission prep website. So I think in the minds of the creators of that website, they could go after the church, right? They could attack the church. They could stop the spread of the faith, right? By Mormonism, right? By put, sort of deconverting potential missionaries or planting doubts in their minds. I just thought it was a really low blow, right? There are, for all kinds of reasons. For one thing, suppose that you're a 17, 18-year-old preparing to go on a mission, and you think that you are, preparing for your mission, building yourself up in terms spiritually and in terms of information about your faith, and actually someone has kind of hoodwinked you, right? And they're trying to deconvert you or plant doubts. Maybe that person decides not to go on a mission, or and that not only that affects their lives in a variety of ways, including socially, right?
Sure.
Or they,
Well,
on a mission.
in a way, that could be preparing them for a mission, because I had a lot of crap thrown at me on my mission that caused me to doubt too. So,
So I
there's
think
always two
that,
sides. Yeah.
sure, I think that a website that honestly was to say, here are problem issues that you might encounter, it would be one thing. But that's not
Yeah.
what this was purporting to do.
Right.
And
Right.
this is not, it was trying to tear down their faith. So,
Sure.
if a kid like encounters this, maybe it plants some doubts, maybe they go on their mission, and then maybe they end up coming home early because of their doubts or something.
Right.
I encountered a number of kids my age when I went on a mission who like at least some who came home early from their missions, and that really affected them. That's a big black mark on someone socially. I have a
Yeah.
friend that happened to, he never, it seemed to really throw him off in terms of he felt like he couldn't date, he never got married. And I that's obviously not the only factor, but I think really it was certainly a significant factor. And so
Sure.
I felt like it was really underhanded. So I actually made a post on Facebook, fairly irate, right, trying to expose this website, right? And so I feel really naturally very protective of young people, right?
Sure.
And so I think that if people want to go after the church, that's one thing. If they want to target missionaries, that's another. So when I was talking with Rebecca yesterday, I told her about this website. She agreed completely. She was saying similar things that I felt like there should be kind of like rules of engagement. Like you don't target, like the rules of war. You don't target the innocent. You don't attack playgrounds. You don't bomb hospitals, right? Like atrocities that are going on multiple sides in conflicts right now in the Middle East, right?
Yeah.
Terrible things. And so she has concerns that I very much understand in this regard. And so she and I were actually very much on the same wavelength with that. She was actually saying she thinks that currently serving missionaries should not be visiting, critical podcasts, right? Like hers or Mormon Stories or, whatnot.
Well,
And
sometimes my podcast is critical too.
yeah,
I'll confess that.
right.
But other times I try to give all sides, let everybody have their say. And, in the interest
Yeah.
of fairness, I actually have been somewhat critical too. I'll confess that.
Of
I
course,
think
yeah.
that's rather obvious.
I
But
recognize
it's
that.
critical with a reason, not just to be a snot-nosed brat. So,
Yeah. Well,
it's
one
all
thing that exactly, yeah. Yeah. So one of I think Rebecca's biggest concern that she expressed on the podcast. So I have to acknowledge first, I watched maybe 80% of the Mormonish episode. It came out kind of late that night. A friend like let me know about it. A friend on a message board that you and I have frequented let me know about it. And but I watched it fairly cursorily. I skipped around some. I watched parts of it on double speed, right?
sure.
So I was asked about talking with another friend earlier today, and he asked me if I had seen the video that was linked where apparently like members of there were people who were on the Cavalry, like some of the scholars there were there was a video of them engaging in a sort of debate with, I believe it was evangelical critics. um, I only saw a little snippet of that, so there's not too much that I can comment on it. But this actually seemed to, I probably should watch it because this seemed to be actually the heart of Rebecca's concern about the group. So when I
About
first,
going after evangelical people.
yeah, maybe the tone, right?
Oh,
So when I first heard about the group, was invited onto the group, one of my thoughts was, um, and your your audience might know that I have kind of a winding spiritual journey when it comes to Mormonism, right? I grew up as a Latter-day Saint. I was
mhm.
very active into my adult life. I left the church for some time. I became an ex-Mormon atheist for some time, period of years. Then I returned to the church. So I've been on different sides of this for sure.
Yeah,
Um, so I have, had my own sorts of faith issues. I know what those issues feel like. I know how painful they can be. I can hardly imagine how difficult it would be to have a faith crisis while you're on your mission, right? The
well, they
emotional
threaten.
pain that might cause, the cognitive dissonance, the
Yeah,
social ramifications if or family ramifications if someone actually loses their faith or decides they need to go home. So many weighty things, and so I really wanted to be of use to the missionaries, right, on the group.
sure.
One of my early thoughts when I was invited onto the group was also, you know, that putting young Latter-day Saints, particularly missionaries, in dialogue with scholars seems to me a really healthy thing, right? So you can have maybe a less black and white faith developed out of that, a more informed faith.
Well,
Future leaders,
in a
go
way,
ahead.
we need to let the leaders know that before these kids go out on a mission because they're getting their black and white thinking from the church, aren't they? I did. I'm just asking,
So
you know.
Latter-day Saint culture certainly has tended to have a lot of black and white thinking.
I think
And
I suspect so.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, for sure. And so one of my thoughts has been that, if young Latter-day Saints are in dialogue with scholars, that can help produce a healthier, more informed, less black and white faith. And future leaders of the church and future scholars of the church are generally going to be probably people who served missions. And so it's good for the church, it's good for the whole faith community to have a more informed, more complex, less black and white faith that can come from young people, particularly her missionaries, being in dialogue with scholars. So I think that the idea behind this is very much a healthy one. Now, going back to Rebecca's concerns, I think she was saying that she was looking at some of the videos posted online that were associated with this Facebook group, right? Because people involved in the group were doing the videos, and she was seeing, and again, I didn't fully watch the video, only a tiny bit of it, so I can't speak directly to the video that she's talking about, right? So, but her concern was that she thought it was very combative, right? She saw it as engineering altercations with critics.
Well, didn't they combat her Facebook page too, though? I thought that was one of her concerns.
After, do you mean, so did they do that before the video? Because the video used, oh, no? Okay. No, I don't know about this. Tell me about
not with my understanding. I might not have the full story, but
okay.
That kind of, that kind of stuff bothers me because that's how I got kicked out of Facebook too. So
really? Okay.
Oh yeah.
Okay. I didn't know about this. What my understanding was, and I might be off, is that after the episode, the Mormonish episode used screenshots that a current member of the Cavalry provided to Rebecca. After they provided the screenshots, because it's a private group, members of the Cavalry, people in charge of the Cavalry, objected to Facebook and did attempt to have her personal Facebook page taken down, which I believe was taken down, then reinstated, then taken down, then reinstated. I believe it's actually currently active now. So there's definitely been some back and forth. What I understand is that Facebook said that ended up saying that the video did violate their policies, so people can watch the video, but they can't share it via Facebook. Because Facebook it's in Facebook's interest to keep private groups private, right? And not allow screenshots to be spread, because otherwise people in private groups won't want to share things privately because it's not really private if it can be shared publicly, right?
Right.
And so, right. So I think that back to what I understood from the podcast and from talking directly on the phone with Rebecca, it was that her concerns had to do with like kind of tone and what might be modeled for the missionaries. And I think she even raised concerns, or one of the podcast members did, about like the name of the group, the Cavalry, right? My guess is that the name, it's because the military name, right? My guess is that they're thinking of the expression, right, about like the cavalry comes in and like saves the day, right? That this is the idea. You probably remember the old Latter-day Saint movie by Richard Dutcher, God's Army, back in the 90s. Military metaphors, I think, have been used a lot for the Latter-day Saint missionary force, which has historically been predominantly young men, right? Sure. And so I think part of her concern was, I know that part of her concern was that there maybe to the contrary of what I was saying, where scholars can model a more thoughtful faith and a less black and white faith. She's thinking, well, but what if what's being modeled for the missionaries is actually something more combative, right? Then that can produce a whole different sort of mindset. And so, like I said, having not actually watched only more than just a snippet of the video that she excerpted there, I can't speak so much to the specific video she's talking about, but to speak to the larger issue, right, of how should Latter-day Saints engage with critics, right? You've mentioned that you are sometimes a critic, right? I am a Latter-day Saint. this is how I think Latter-day Saints should engage with critics, right? Is open conversation and civil dialogue, right?
Well,
And so,
you're a rare breed then, because we've tried, we've actually tried to do that. No offense to any Mormons, but the minute you begin to criticize, you're ostracized. And I mean, take for instance Patrick Mason. What kind of good would it truly have done if Patrick Mason had been allowed, I'm saying allowed, quote, to dialogue with John Dehlin? I get it. John's critical. I get it. John uses people who are critical. But the Mormons told Patrick Mason, no, you can't do that. And so he had to back out.
Who told him? I actually am not familiar with
all of his ward and all kinds of people, based on what little I know.
Okay.
But it was definitely stopped, and they were going to have a friendly conversation to see all sides. And it seems like the Mormon congregation that he belonged to, the ward, they said, well, we feel like we're being abandoned and you shouldn't do this. And I don't know how far up that went, but Patrick Mason is well connected. So I love your philosophy. I am in complete agreement with it. But just so you know, not everyone is.
I think that I mean, when I read in the Book of Mormon about how the spirit of contention is of the devil, right? That doesn't encourage me to be contentious. I don't see, I see, in some ways, I think a model of healthy masculinity might be Christ, right? Who was willing to sort of shoulder the pains of others, right? I think that, and so I understand very much the kinds of concerns that Rebecca was expressing about, how we engage, and that if there is discourse that is combative, then that actually would present the wrong sort of model to young Latter-day Saints. So I very much favor, being polite. You might remember, actually, Carrie, there was several years ago, it was when Thomas S. Monson was the president of the church. It was when there was a lot of really divisive political discourse. The then called Mormon Newsroom put something out about the Latter-day Saint tradition of civil dialogue, right? And so there is.
Well, that's what Russell Nelson's calling for again today, too. Truly.
Who is?
I say that's what Russell Nelson is calling for.
Yeah.
Let's have a more civil dialogue. And so sometimes I try to, but I gotta confess, sometimes it's really hard to when you see some of the things that are said,
Yeah, I think all the way around, people have difficulty with this. I'm not I'd be lying if I claimed that I never have trouble staying civil, or that I never get frustrated. That there aren't things that, thank you, that there aren't things that anger me. But, when you and I were talking about doing this segment of the episode yesterday, you mentioned to me that, you were one of the people who helped to start FAIR,
absolutely,
the Latter-day Saint Apologetics organization, and that maybe some of what this Cavalry group is trying to do sounded to you like some of what you guys were trying to do in starting FAIR.
Yeah, it sounds very much like the. In fact, I know Daryl Barksdale is involved with this group. I saw his name somewhere. And he and I and Julianne Reynolds started FAIR those many years ago. Now I'm gray. Yeah. But a lot of the same approach really reflects the philosophy that we had with FAIR. So, I mean, it's the intention is good. So far as I can tell. So it's just that there's a lot of people asking about it. And so I thought, well, Don Bradley knows stuff that I don't. So I wanted to have Don to explain it a little bit. So I appreciate that.
Thank you. And I there are obviously going to be various people on the group. They will have different approaches.
Oh, sure.
And so, but since you have been a believing Latter-day Saint, you've been an apologist, and that's not where you are now, right? And you sometimes act in the role of critic. And, I've been like initially a believing Latter-day Saint, then like an ex-Mormon who to some extent acted as a critic, right? And then I have returned to the church. We have the situation of having been different places on this continuum. And so one of the things that I would really encourage people to do, particularly people who've been multiple places on this continuum, it should be easy to have empathy.
Should be is the
places on this, right? Because if you've been where someone else is, oh my gosh, the cat.
Oh, I love cats.
That's my cat, Moria. So
that's awesome.
she wanted to make a little cameo on the video.
It's the Dawn and Cat Show.
So if you've been where someone else is, you kind of, in a sense, you've been them, right? So if you've sort of been someone else, in a sense, you've been in the position they're in, it should be the easiest thing in the world to have empathy for them. So I've been an ex-Mormon. I've been a critic, right? And when I was an ex-Mormon, I had been a believing Latter-day Saint. So surely we can have some empathy for one another, I would hope. And so I hope that comes out in our dialogue. I hope that people tend to assume the best of one another, even while they have very significant differences with one another. I would hope that people would try to model, that all of us would try to model the way that we think things should be. If someone sees other people being too combative, then it would be good to model being more collaborative, right? If we see, behavior that looks toxic, right, then it's incumbent on us to do things that are healthy, right? And so I would hope that people could recognize sincerity in one another and engage on the level of ideas rather than motives, personalities, and things like that.
You're asking the right thing, but you are asking a lot. And the reason is because I've come out, I have been called an enemy by former Mormon friends simply because of my ideas. And I get it. I mean, I haven't exactly been empathetic myself to some Mormons. I do this BYP Respond series. And sometimes somebody will say something. I just did 3 of them yesterday that I cannot ignore. I've got to express myself and all. So this is I would classify this as a work in progress, so long as we're not stabbed behind our back. And I can just hear the howls of derision from very good Mormons who are saying I'm a hypocrite because they feel like I've stabbed them behind their back. I don't see it that way. If they feel that way, that's fine. But I'm here on YouTube presenting it up front, and I've already invited them. Come on to my show. Here you are, and we're not having any kind of a bad, nasty discussion or me slashing you or you slash. I've had Jonathan Neville on. I've had biblical scholars on. I've had Trevin Hatch, the BYU New Testament scholar. He's awesome. So there can and ought to be a legitimate dialogue without the fear. Much easier said than done. I get it, because I have really jumped down people's throats before. So I'm energetic, and that can end up making people fearful of me. But this is kind of the impression some of us are getting about the Cavalry theme also is, what's really happening. And so I'm really glad you're here to try to express that and to say, hey, I get help from scholars. I guarantee it. I've got Bible scholars and archaeologists and people who talk to me behind the scenes to help me prepare my materials too. So the idea of giving these kids help, it's all good to me.
Yeah, I see only good intentions in it. In talking with the others involved, I've only ever seen good intentions. I've never seen intentions to deceive. I've seen the opposite. I've seen intentions to protect from what is perceived as deception from people on sort of the other side of this, right? And I realize all of us fall down sometimes in the level of discourse that we have. I'm
Sure.
not going to claim that doesn't happen on that hasn't happened on this group. I'm not going to claim that hasn't happened in my own comments, different places on the internet, right? I think the internet is the easiest place in the world to drop the level of our discourse, because the people that we're talking to, we're not talking to usually, unlike here, right? Like, we're not usually talking to face to face. They're just like words on a screen. And so it's easy to say things that are not the best. I would hope we will all the way around try to raise the level of our discourse and have more constructive discussions that focus on the ideas that we differ on, and try to ultimately elevate.
Yeah. And I think part of this is too that people are fearful of criticism, and I get that.
Yeah.
And so we shy away from. I mean, I've actually had to publicly apologize to the church on YouTube, on my channel, for misrepresenting them, because I was so mad one time. I threw an absolute gasket. And so I've had to turn around and apologize. I'm willing to do that. Yeah. So I'll call a spade and I'll call a rose a rose. You know? But so in that spirit, I have noticed there's a couple people in my chat who have indicated to me that they're aware that people in this group, Cavalry, with the best intentions, I'm sure. I just want this to be public so that in the spirit of helping. Now here you go. Here you have someone who's somewhat of a critic. Actually, I am. Sometimes I'm a real rough one. But in the spirit of trying to help this group, and you can pass this on to them, I will say this with all sincerity. I've understood that they are using some of my old, fair apologetic materials. And I don't know which ones they are. I don't know. My assumption, and I'm happy to be corrected if it's important, but my assumption is it's probably some of the Book of Abraham stuff, because I was one of the go-getters on that subject, or some of my early Book of Mormon apologetic videos, etc. Whatever it is they're using, I would just like to say, in the spirit of helpfulness, you are not doing anybody any good with that, because in the interim from then to now, I recognized that my methodology was wrong. And methodology, Hugh Nibley was wrong on that. My hero. I read everything that man wrote 10 times. I swear to goodness. But his attitude of methodology was wrong. I looked for everything that supported Joseph Smith's interpretation and ignored all the rest. That leads to absolute disaster. It doesn't work. It's the wrong method. So if you are using my materials, I'm not mad because there's a copyright issue or whatever, but you're going to lead people to a faith crisis, especially if it's with the Egyptian stuff, because if those people are using those arguments and they run into a real biblical scholar or a real Egyptologist, they're going to lose their faith. The Egyptologist is going to tear my stupid junk apart. I'm tearing my stupid junk apart. So in the spirit of helpfulness, you guys, the Cavalry group, not you, Don Bradley, but the Cavalry group, if you would pass this on, you guys, seriously, if you're still using my 20-year-old stuff, you've got to get serious and update your knowledge, because so much has changed in the 20 years since I was an apologist. So in the spirit of helpfulness, I'll throw that out there.
Got it. Yeah. Okay. And so, yeah, that's understandable to me. I know they mentioned on the Mormonish podcast, I think it was there, that they mentioned that some of your apologetic material was still being used.
That's where
and
I
haven't personally, I haven't personally seen that. But if I understand you right, what you're saying is that using that ultimately isn't doing anyone any favors, because you now see that it was flawed. And so using that might be kind of a Band-Aid, but you feel like it might be setting others up for a faith crisis in the future, because it's not sound. Those aren't sound arguments. So if they use those arguments and then people rely on them, and then they find out later that they're not sound arguments, then they sort of lose a prop that they've used for their faith rather than grounding it on something more solid.
Very well repeated. Yeah, you say it so much better than I do. Would you be my spokesman?
If you're Moses, I'll be Aaron.
And sincerely, if we can't remain flexible mentally, spiritually, psychologically, if we can't remain flexible in the face of new evidence, because we're finite, we don't have the whole information. We really don't. We don't see the whole picture. If you're not following the evidence, which is the only way to change the probability of something being real or not, true or not, evidence changes it. Faith does not. You can have all the faith in the world. The moon is blue cheese, and it ain't going to work. It doesn't make it blue cheese. If the evidence says, yeah, these moon rocks are rocks, then by golly, you say that moon is rock. You're safe that way. That's what I mean. So follow the evidence, but remain flexible and change in light of that evidence would be my advice. Yeah.
I think, because you and I have known each other for, we've been friends 20 years or something. I think you know this. As a historian, I really just want to know what happened. I just want to know what happened. So I'm totally open to changing my mind about whatever, right? I just want to know what happened. So using the evidence to figure out what happened in the past, right? Decidedly, right? And now, for me, a lot of where my personal faith comes in is understanding the meaning of the events that happened in the past once I see what happened based on the evidence, right? So that's kind of part of my approach. I wanted to circle back just a little bit, because something occurred to me, Carrie, where as we're talking about like the level of discourse on all of this, I wanted to say something more personal, and that is, I recognize my humanness. I recognize that both when I was outside the church and since I've come back, and even sometimes relatively recently, I've fallen down in my own level of discourse, particularly on the internet, right? And so, like, I want to apologize for that, right? Whenever I have fallen down from having constructive discourse with others, I apologize, right? I want to start elevating the discourse by elevating my own discourse, right? And I want to engage with people in a spirit of, I really honestly don't see things in terms of sides. That's a sort of a personal philosophy, is I tend to believe that people are seeking truth, particularly people who engage in scholarship and these kinds of discussions about what Latter-day Saint scripture or what happened in Latter-day Saint history and so on. And so when I look at other scholars, whether they are Latter-day Saints or not, I think they're trying to find truth. I'm trying to find truth. That puts us on the same side not an opposite side. So for me, ultimately, we're all part of the same, like scientists who are favoring different theories. Ultimately, that it's the dialogue between them that leads us to confirm certain theories, disconfirm others, whatever the individual views of the scientists. So they don't, they're antagonists to one another. They're all part of the same process of sorting out truth. At least for me as a historian, that's how I see it. So in any case where I have departed from that, been personally combative, or misrepresented someone, or not acknowledged truths where they may be found, whether those truths are historical, spiritual, ethical, or even emotional, just people's lived experience.
Oh, sure.
I apologize. I apologize. Right.
On behalf of myself, which you've never offended, I accept your apology. But I am going to ask you for a big favor, and I'm not being facetious here, my friend.
Okay. Sure. Mm-hmm.
That what you just said in the last 5 minutes is absolutely wonderful, but that message needs to get back to the Mormons, because your ideology is so high, it's hard to get there. And I'm speaking from my personal experience, because in a way, one of the attractions of fair was I was going to go kick butt. I was going to prove to people my view of the Bible's better. And so I liked that idea. So many are still like that. And so there is a level of putting anyone down who doesn't think about the gospel the way they do. I mean, that's why we have the Mesoamerican theory of the Book of Mormon and the Heartland theory of the Book of Mormon. That's why we have the issues.
Well, it's not why we have those theories, but it's why people who hold those different models have sometimes been very critical of each other and been at each other's throats, as if people who hold the other model were somehow apostates or insincere, which I've even seen people heavily criticize each other in the past for holding different understandings of the Book of Abraham, different Book of Abraham apologetics. They're all trying to support the Book of Abraham, but they're doing it differently. And so it wasn't okay for this person to be doing it differently than the others. That doesn't make sense to me. These are very high ideals. They actually were expressed early in the Latter-day Saint, in the founding of the faith, right? So Joseph Smith said, it is one of the grand fundamental principles of Mormonism, receive truth, let it come from whence it may. So wherever there's truth, the idea is we're supposed to go gather it. He also said, if I esteem mankind to be in error, shall I bear them down? No, I will lift them up, and each in his own way. I will ask no man to believe as I do, or something. I think I have that almost exactly.
I will give credit to Joseph Smith for those sentiments without hesitation. Yeah, he had something there that we've lost.
Right.
And maybe you and I can help return that. You know,
well, just like all Christians believe in the Sermon on the Mount, but it's very difficult to live it. Very difficult to live it, right? And so these are ideals that are actually there at the very founding of the faith for Latter-day Saints like myself. They're very high ideals. They're very difficult to live. That doesn't mean that we should not hold them as ideals and try to live them. And I would hope that we all would, and I would hope that even for those who are not Latter-day Saints, that we would just all recognize each other's common humanity and try to generate more light than heat in our discussions.
I love it. Yeah. I've had this same conversation with Steve Pinecker, my good friend from Mormon Book Reviews, and Jonathan Neville and all that. But as more of us express the ideal, we also need to recognize that there is going to be friction, because I'm looking at evidence differently. I'm actually looking at different evidence that I wouldn't look at as an apologist. And that's partly of what changed my perception. So in that process, we all tend to become judgmental. I'm with you on that.
For sure.
But that doesn't mean that we go attack other people on Facebook or on the YouTube or try to get people suspended or burn crosses in your lawn with gasoline. Never use gasoline. Whoever does that, use diesel fuel. Gasoline explodes. I'm here to help. So I know So, but yeah, the ideal is important. Understanding that we are not at that cusp yet, that can be tough. And I admit, I've got, I've still got several comments from church leaders that I really need to beat the snot out of because I vehemently disagree with them, and I'm going to do reviews of them, not in the spirit of antagonism to them in their person, just the nature of their argument. And so, see, that's what makes me, in some eyes, appear to be an enemy of everybody. So, you're kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't, because I can't go against my principles. Joseph Smith said, truth, let it come from wherever it may.
Right.
The crazy thing is, we have discovered within my lifetime that the critics of the church had vastly more truth than they were ever given credit for, and yet they were kicked out because they said that truth. And so that's one of my, beans of contention that grinds me. So anyway,
there was there was an article several years back, and I don't remember who wrote it. I can't remember if it came out through FAIR or who. It was actually an article about someone wrote, a Latter-day Saint wrote about things that we've learned from critics of the church, right? Where they, I think, were really actually acknowledging things that have been learned. An example, I think, might be that years ago, Brent Metcalf published, he wasn't the first one to develop that. It was actually Robert F. Smith, who's a Latter-day, no, is that right? No, I may be wrong on that. Sorry.
No, I think Robert F. Smith has been baptized.
Yeah, he is a Latter-day Saint. But Brent Metcalf wrote an article about the idea that the Book of Mosiah was translated before First Nephi. That when Joseph Smith, after the loss of the manuscript, he didn't go back and translate the small plates to replace them. Immediately he continued where he left off, went from Mosiah through Moroni, then did First Nephi, right, the small plates. He argued that Royal Skousen actually agreed with that while criticizing parts of what Metcalf had argued, that might be an example where a critic actually was presenting something that shed some light. Obviously, critics and Latter-day Saints are not going to agree on things like foundational faith claims. That's what makes one a believer and one not a believer, right? So by definition, they won't agree on those. But if the discourse there could focus on the merits of the ideas being presented, right, rather than getting personally nasty, I don't see who loses from doing it that way.
Those who claim to have the truth without looking at the evidence. That's why I do my channel. I mean, I agree with your sentiment, but realistically, there are losers in this game if we assume that we're coming at this from truth instead of discovery. Does that make sense?
Truth instead of discovery?
Yeah, because if I come at someone with the idea that, well, I've already got the truth, that automatically shuts you off to any kind of discovery, because you're not going to look where the truth is not in the Baptists or Catholics, so they're not bother even studying them. I'm going to study my own history. I've had seminary teachers tell me that. So there's always there's all these nuances and stuff like that. I'm not trying to make it complicated. I'm just saying it's complicated.
So so are you familiar? We should probably wrap up in just a minute here, but you're probably familiar with the pragmatist philosopher C.S. Peirce, spelled like Pierce.
Yeah, yes.
Charles Sanders Peirce. So I think he was the father of the philosophy of pragmatism. A better known exponent would be William James, right? He wrote a paper like a century ago or something. I'm almost remembering the exact name of the paper, but he coined a term of what he called fallibilism. So he said, where we are absolutely convinced of our viewpoint on something, we will not do further inquiry on that thing. So having a degree of uncertainty about our view actually helps us to spur further inquiry where we discover more truth, right? And so I actually see, like, I did a podcast episode on another podcast people could look up on YouTube, on Alma 32, where I actually think that Alma 32 in the Book of Mormon gives us sort of similar view of doing experiments with truth, right? So again, I think that just like Joseph Smith saying, we take truth wherever we find it, that it is incumbent on us to do experiments with truth, to seek truth, right? So I think that we're certainly on the same page regarding that, whether or not, obviously we're not going to be on the same page. No two people should be be ditto heads and agree on everything. And we're at different places right now in our faith and so on. So we're not going to agree on everything. But I think in terms of being willing to pursue more information to change one's perspective, I don't personally see that as inimical to faith. I think healthy faith includes that. I see personally, like Alma 32 in the Book of Mormon, encouraging that.
There is hope if you can spread that philosophy further than just you and I.
I think it's there in the Book of Mormon, so I think
but that's not how so many Mormons read that passage. So I think, no offense, I mean this as a compliment. And I haven't kept up with the lingo. I confess that. I am an old fuddy-dud, but you're more religiously and accurately progressive than the majority of Mormons. And that's pure good, in my opinion. Now, I'm not saying you're woke or not. I don't mean that. You use that word progressive, and man, you can get massacred because I'm not meaning. What I mean is what? Forward thinking, more, you say broad-minded, and it just scares the hell out of 3/4 of the Mormons. The other fourth of the Mormons say, well, I'm already open-minded. So you ask them a couple of quick questions and they get ready to stone you. I mean, they fly apart like glass. That's what Joseph Smith kept complaining about. Well, that hasn't changed much. In a way, crazy, in a big way, actually. That's why I'm on this side and not that one. Isn't that nuts? That's crazy, isn't it? It's so remarkably interesting how when we share our hope for the betterment of humanity to one another, when you get real doctrinaire and sure that you have the truth, that does not bring peace. And I'm taking this way off the rails with this.
I appreciate the compliment.
It causes divisions, not. Anyway, I don't see any other. I mean, religion has never unified anybody. Unfortunately, that's.
I don't think that's true.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. 40,000 different groups of Christians that all fight each other. Right?
Well, there we'd need to get into historical and sociological evidence on the effects.
I know. Let's not.
Okay.
We'll do that for another podcast.
Okay, sure.
I really love gratitude. So,
so when I told my wife that we were going to just do a 15-minute segment, she said something indicating her doubt. So she was clearly right. So suppose we ought to wrap up. But thank you for having me on, Carrie.
oh, well, thank you for coming on and explaining. I hope this has been useful to you. It's been useful to me. It's been wonderful. It's always good to talk to you, though, Don. I mean, whether it's on the phone or in person or across a computer screen. Are you going to Sunstone next weekend?
I don't know for sure.
Oh, go on Saturday. Go on Saturday.
Partial conflict.
Oh, do you? Yeah. I'm going to try to get there on Saturday. I can't go for the full time, but I am going to go on Saturday. So
sweet.
So anyway,
right.
Okay. Well, thank you again so much for coming on and sharing your incredible wisdom and insight and ideas. And tell everyone hi for me at Cavalry, especially Daryl Barksdale. It's fun to see where he ended up at. We kind of lost track of each other. I know he got quite frustrated with me when I started getting critical of some of our formerly combined held beliefs. So I hope he doesn't see me as an enemy. I've never intended to be. So anyway, tell him hi for me if you run into him. So
okay.
All right, Don Bradley, you are a good man. Thanks for coming on.
Sure. Take care.
You have a good night. Absolutely.
You too. Okay. Bye-bye.
All right. Well, that took a lot longer than I expected, and I'm glad for it because I like Don. I know we all here in this audience and myself disagree with things he says. I get that. Yeah. And him and I have actually had a long 5-hour discussion, more or less an argument going back and forth on our disagreements. And so it was fun to have him on. My reason for having him on was not to cause problems for him or to argue with him or whatever. But I mean, you guys know me by now. Sometimes someone will say something and I have to say, yeah, I get it, but here's one of my issues, there's one of my issues, etc. Otherwise, I wouldn't be actually truthful. Now, here's the sad thing about all of this, you guys. I am going to get absolutely wiped out for using clickbait with my refuting Rabbi Tovia Singer. In fact, I saw some people in the audience that showed up for that discussion of my disagreement with Rabbi Tovia Singer on Psalm 22. And I sincerely apologize. I did not mean to make this clickbait. Don asked for 10 minutes. And of course, I'm going to be happy to give him 2 hours if that's what he needed to talk to discuss this issue. And here it is, an hour and 10 minutes. I sincerely apologize. I don't have time to respond to Tovia Singer right now. Now, the nice thing is I can do a video, and I will. In fact, my intention is to do a video in response to Tovia Singer and his interpretation. And then I'm going to do another video of a detailed exegesis of Psalm 22 and explore all the ins and outs. Here's what I've been doing that is so remarkably delightful for me. I'm the weird duck out. I get it. Probably none of you will ever do this, and I feel sorry for you. No offense intended, but you're really missing out. And I'm very serious. I have been for the last several months listening to Jews for Judaism on YouTube. And I have also been listening to another group of Jews for Jesus, the Messianic Jews. And what I've been doing is I pick a topic that I want to explore. I see what the Jews for Judaism say. Then I go to the Jews for Jesus and see what they say, and I compare the two. Now, there ain't nothing like a Jew who really knows his scriptures they put Mormons and the inspired church leaders to absolute shame with their vast amount of knowledge. I have found no better way in the world, I swear to goodness. It's so much fun. This is weird. Yeah, the BYP has lost his lid. He thinks it's fun to study the Old Testament. Is he wigging out? No. This is the very coolest way I have ever discovered for studying the Bible, is with the Jews. Now, I said that at fair, but now online on YouTube, you listen to Jews for Judaism, then you use the counter argument, the Jews for Jesus. And then you find the counter argument of the counter argument, and you go back and forth on however many subjects on whatever they're talking about and see what they're arguing about and see what kind of material and evidences that they come up with. And it's spectacular. I am learning Greek. I am learning Hebrew. I am learning Aramaic. I am learning ancient history. I am learning archaeology, and I am learning Old Testament all at once. It is the most magnificent, comprehensive way I have ever discovered of studying the Scripture. It's intellectual. Crazy, but I know, but it's also spiritual. And it's fascinating to see these two groups going at each other. Because in the process, they're educating me, man. It's crazy. I'll tell you what, Mormonism has flunked. They get an F. Failure for teaching me about the Old Testament. Hell, I never knew a billionth of the Old Testament from those idiots out of Salt Lake City that I'm learning from Judah, the Jews. Yes! Thank you, God, for having your people here that take the Scripture seriously and actually give us a reason to say, oh, hey, that was cool. I didn't know that. Oh, well, I never looked at it that way, etc. And I mean, you really want a power trip? You really want a way to absolutely refute the Book of Mormon prophecy of Ezekiel 37, the stick of Judas, stick of Joseph? Go study it with the Jews. I'm telling you, eye-opening. So that's my hint. No, I can't help it. No, I'm not going to become Jewish. No, I'm not going to go back to church. Relax. Just the intellectual fun makes it all worth it for me, personally. I don't know how else to explain it. I have no idea. But I'll tell you what, these guys are really cool. I'm serious. They're crazy in a lot of ways too. And I am serious. So, you get some good and you get some bad and you get some really, no, I don't want you as my neighbor. I don't want you as my friend. But I did think your idea on Psalm 22 was interesting. Things like that. I apologize. I know I'm going to get slammed for clickbait. God, I hope someone doesn't turn me in for, and I get banned from YouTube for this. I did not expect to talk to Don this long. I really intended on getting to Rabbi Tovia Singer, but I just can't. So anyway, I will make some videos. Maybe what I'll do is I'll keep researching Psalm 22, and we'll do this next weekend. Although, I mean, it's not what you think. It is, for me, absolutely electrifying. It's fascinating what I've learned about one stupid little psalm. And actually about King David, and actually about the entire structure of the whole book of. I mean, with the Jews, it's a flood of information and knowledge. Nothing like it on the planet. You know, Mormons can't even compare. It's like a mosquito running the 100-yard dash against the Olympic champion. Just not going to happen. And it shouldn't be that way, but after all, you know, Mormons don't want you to think, they want you to believe. And that's one of my big burrs under my saddle. I don't like that. Jews, they want you to get off your dead lazy ass and start thinking. And here's the, I love them. Man, I love them. I can't. Anyway, yeah, now I'm slobbering all over myself. All right, yeah. There you go. It's just a flesh wound. Thanks, Lee Mortensen. Oh, that's fun. I don't take calls, otherwise I would. I wish I did. I don't have a live line. Sorry. Do I have time to take a call from God? No. Tell him to get his butt down here personally, like he's supposed to do with Joseph Smith, like he supposedly did with Joseph Smith. God wants to talk to me, bring it, but you come here. You did it before, you're going to have to do it again. No more bias, no more prejudice, no more racism. You treat us all like we're your genuine kids, or stick it in your ear for a while. I'm busy studying the Old Testament with the Jews. Yeah, and I get it. There's going to be people say, oh, you are such a blasphemer. Bullshit. I want consistency. The problem with theology is it's so inconsistent, they should be blushing with absolute embarrassment. And I'm not saying the Jews are bringing consistency either, because, man, the Jews for Judaism and the Jews for Jesus are vastly worse than the reorganized Mormon church and the Mormon church was after Joseph Smith died. These guys are amazing how they go at it. It's glorious. So, anyway, okay, Tim needs to call me. Okay, hang on. I'm going to end this. You got my number, don't you, Tim? I think you do. I've got your number. If you don't call me in 10 minutes, I'll call you. But I really do have to go, up to the little boys' room. So I love y'all. Thank you for your support. Thank you, Steve Acosta. Dude, next time I'm where you are, I promise I'm taking you to dinner. You're awesome. All of you are awesome. I'd love to get us all together and have a great big shindig at a big park or something. Let's try to make that happen. So anyway. All right, you guys, thank you for all your support. I got to go. Hey, don't forget, Mormon News Roundup. Hey, you're here too. Hi, Tessa Smith. Good to see you. Yeah, go watch Mormon News Roundup. I can't tonight. I wish I could. I'm not trying to not support you, Dives. I'm just saying. I got so much crap going on. So, okay, you guys, I will catch up to you soon. Have a great week. I'll see you next week. Watch out for some videos. I'm going to be producing a lot more. Oh, and thank you for my support of the BYP response videos. Those 3 I made yesterday were an absolute blast to make. A lot more of those coming out too. So you got to keep these stupid apologists in check, right? All right. See you guys soon. I love y'all, but I got to go.